So to start this speech, it's not like my normal ones where I usually kind of make a joke out of it and try and get through it. It's a little bit more serious of a topic. So should mental rehabilitation also go along with baseball players who have Tommy John surgery? As many of you know, baseball players are a different breed. We breathe the game. We are the game. So what happens when we go without it? And not by our choice. On April 1st, 2017, I faced one of the toughest challenges in my life. I tore my UCL, both of them, because when it comes together, there's a cross that goes here, and it kind of connects the elbow to the humerus of the upper arm. It was a cold day. It was about 40 degrees in Buffalo, New York. Tough shake, just because I'm not used to throwing in that kind of weather. On May 24th, I had the surgery, and that was one of the tougher days of my life. I was very scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought I was done playing baseball. There were many problems beforehand and after surgery. I believe Tommy John surgery, also known as UCL reconstruction, has a strong mental impact on baseball players. This is because their everyday life depends on their health. What is Tommy John surgery? Tommy John surgery is the repair of the UCL, ulnar collateral ligament, in your elbow. A couple of statistics: 78 of athletes who have the surgery return to pitching, where 22% don't. 30% of MLB pitchers have had it, which is a high number. My surgery actually was 43 years after the first one. During the surgery, they take the palmaris longus, which is a tendon that runs from your wrist into your elbow. They remove that, drill 2 canals into your elbow, and connect the palmaris longus inside. The timetable for the surgery is about 12 months to 18 months. My surgery was a little bit of a different story since I wasn't going back to pitching competitively. It was more of 9 months just because I was playing a position and the stress is different throwing from flat ground to a mound. What is it like? The pain is unbelievable. I felt like somebody was stabbing me in the elbow with a steak knife, and it was just unbearable. Secondly, I knew what happened as soon as it popped. It was very scary. I didn't know what to expect. I never thought I would be in that situation because you hear about guys who have it and then you're in the seat and it just doesn't feel good. This also taught me patience. It took me 2 weeks before I could move my arm at all. I sat through 2.5 hours sitting in the same position, moving my arm back and forth. I had to wait 3.5 weeks to start therapy. The muscle rebuilding took 2 months. The length of the throwing was about 6 months is when I picked up the baseball and actually started throwing. And even when I started throwing for another 2.5 months, I'd say there was a great fear of re-injury. The fear of re-injury is a lot of what started the issues. Beforehand, I was a very talkative kid. I always liked to be social. I hung out with my teammates and loved showing up to the ball field, getting to work. I was always positive. I was always smiling. I never really had any problems, and I was always happy just because I could play the game healthy and freely. However, after, I was short-tempered because I couldn't perform the way I wanted to. I couldn't even throw a baseball, and it just got very frustrating. I was also afraid of letting others know how distraught I actually was. From Diana Lattimore, she speaks of injuries. They facilitate a sense of loss, negative emotions, mood disturbances, and a fear in the athlete. And for some athletes, an injury takes away compensation and consequently increases life stress and decreases overall well-being. From this point, I was more isolated than anything. I really didn't want to talk to anybody. I really didn't want to burden anybody else with my problems. I didn't have baseball, and I really didn't have anything to look forward to through the day, so I really struggled in school. I really didn't think there was a point to going to class at all. Dr. Alan Goldberg, who has a PhD in sports psychology, speaks of it as a loss of athletic identity. He also says an athlete's career in the sport in which they play is very much identity-based and not just an aspect of who they are. Isolation led to further issues. My goals going into college is being a starter as a freshman, which is very rare. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication, and I didn't do that, so I was pretty frustrated with myself there. As soon as I got hurt, I lost motivation to work out, and I really didn't interact with my teammates all that much just because I didn't really feel like I was a part of the team anymore. I also stood in the sidelines and did jobs for everybody else, which made me very jealous of them since they could play. Lastly is mental health. Mental health is the basis of all human health. If the brain is not in unison with the body, there ends up to be a disaster. Becoming depressed and dealing with post-surgery struggles, I wondered why the game I put so much effort into would do such a thing to me. I began to lose social skills. I stuttered, I couldn't make eye contact with people, and it was very hard to just go through life knowing that I wasn't happy. From this, I fell to drinking. I was drunk for about 2 weeks straight. Mark Davidson, who was a pitcher for Cal State Fullerton, said, I'd never taken a sip of alcohol leading up to my surgery, but I never experienced such a strong desire to escape my reality. It started about 2.5 weeks after my surgery when I found out that it was completely torn and not just a partial tear. And at that point, it was definite that I couldn't do stem cells or anything to rehabilitate my elbow. And it ended when did it end? I'm about to get into that. This is where it gets kind of tough here, but at this point, I really just felt like I was a burden to society. I didn't really talk to anybody. I didn't do much. I just kind of sat around and wasted time. I only drank and felt bad for myself and really didn't want to interact with anybody else and figured nobody else would want to deal with my issues, so I didn't interact with them. Toughest day of my life was probably my parents were out of town watching my brother run a marathon, and I had a half bottle of Jack Daniels in my bag from school, and I finished it. I went to my dad's room and grabbed his pistol, and this was just because I was clouded because I didn't have something to identify who I was, and I really didn't know what I wanted from my life at that point. From there, I proceeded to put the gun to my head and pull the trigger. All I heard was the click, and I was very confused. I didn't know what it was. It was very, life hits you pretty quick at that point, and it's definitely tough to understand what just happened. And I looked at the gun and emptied the bullet from the chamber, and the primer went off, but the bullet did not come out. That was the fastest I ever sobered up. And from this point, I realized why I was living. I realized that life is, too short, and I got another chance at it. So from this point, how did I take action? And how could I? So I asked that question myself every day. What can I do to get better? And so I looked some stuff up, did some research, and talk therapy or anger management is what I went with. I met with a psychiatrist after that, and we talked about these issues and why they came up, and a lot of it goes back to being identity-based. I didn't know who I was because I didn't have baseball. And Mark Davidson from Cal State Fullerton says, I wish talk therapy and anger management were considered a part of the rehabilitation process. I feel like this should have been a part of regular doctor visits as well as physical therapy. The brain is very much connected to everyday life. I mean, you can't function without the brain and the body being connected. So when there is that lopsided battle, it's very hard to go through every day. And it's always better to catch these problems early rather than late. So if you get in front of it and stop it, then it would be easier than a reaction to the problem. This also gave me a tool that I could use without burdening another person. Cognitive therapy was the best thing for me, and and it allowed me to identify my negative thinking patterns and then challenge them. That's also a quote from Mark Davidson, and I agree with him. Being able to push myself through something really taught me a lot. Showed me that I can do things even if I'm the only person there. I don't need outside motivation to get through life. It's a great tool to use to get self-motivated. Lattimore goes on to say even more, without successful emotional rehabilitation, total recovery is incomplete. So so I feel that without being emotionally there and just being healthy physically, and you're not all there mentally, it's very hard to get back to sport and be confident in what you're doing. Going through the cognitive therapy and working on my cognitive behavior, which is working on myself, it helped me regain confidence and push through things. To close this out, I feel that Tommy John surgery has a negative effect on baseball players mentally. I feel that there should be regular visits to psychiatrists who can help and solve these issues and also figure them out early and have a proactive attack to this problem. So think about this. Next time you see someone with an injury, whether they're an athlete or not, ask them how they're doing. It can go a long way and leave a positive impact on them.